Aliens found humans, living on a forgotten moon. Their warships were everywhere. The scout ship Silent Current drifted through the dark like a shark moving through deep water. It made almost no sound and gave off almost no light. This was the whole point of the ship. It was built to see without being seen. Captain Ren Solove stood on the small bridge and watched the main screen. Space stretched out in front of her, black and endless, dotted with cold stars. She was a Vantori, one of the many peoples who lived under the rule of the Threshold Compact, a huge alliance of star systems that had been growing for over 1,000 years. Her skin was a pale blue-gray, and her eyes were large and dark, made for seeing in dim light. She had spent 20 years in the Scout Service, and in that time, she had mapped hundreds of systems that nobody else wanted to visit. This system was one of those places. It did not even have a real name. In the old star charts kept by the Compact, it was simply called Sector 1118 Dead. The word dead was important. It meant that a long time ago, some Compact survey ship had come through, found nothing of value, and marked the whole area as empty. No resources worth mining, no worlds worth settling, no signs of life. After that, nobody came back. For over 200 years, Sector 118 Dead had simply been forgotten. But now the Compact was expanding again. New colonies needed new land, new resources, new places to build. So old records were being checked one more time, just to be sure nothing had been missed. That was why Ren Solove and her small crew of 6 were out here, at the edge of nowhere, doing a job that nobody thought would produce any real results. "Report," Ren said quietly. Her navigator, a young Vantori named Dessa Kor, looked up from her console. "We are 3 hours from the outer edge of the system, Captain. Long-range sensors are online. Nothing unusual so far. 1 star, average size, 6 planets, 1 gas giant with several moons." "Which moon caught your attention earlier?" Ren asked. She had noticed Dessa frowning at her screen 20 minutes ago. Dessa hesitated. "The 4th moon of the gas giant. It is small, maybe half the size of our homeworld's moon. According to the old records, it should be nothing but rock and ice, but I am picking up something strange." "Strange how?" "A heat signature, very faint. It should not be there at all. Rock and ice do not produce heat on their own." Ren felt a small prickle of interest. In 20 years of scouting, she had learned to trust these small strange details. Most of the time they turned out to be nothing. A meteor strike, a pocket of trapped gas venting slowly into space. But sometimes they were something else. "Keep watching it," Ren said. "Bring us in closer, but slowly, full stealth protocol. I want to see this moon before it sees us." The Silent Current adjusted its course. It was a small ship, built for exactly this kind of quiet, careful work. It had almost no weapons, because weapons were heavy and loud and drew attention. Instead it had layers of sensors, cloaking systems, and enough fuel to run silent for months if needed. Its crew of 6 were all specialists, hand-picked people, who could read the smallest signs in empty space and turn them into useful information. Hours passed. The ship moved closer to the gas giant, a huge banded world of orange and brown clouds, swirling slowly like paint stirred in water. Around it circled a dozen moons of different sizes. Most were simple balls of ice and rock, exactly as the old record said, but the 4th moon was different. As the Silent Current crept closer, more details appeared on the sensor screens. The moon was gray and cratered, much like any other dead moon in any other forgotten system. But scattered across its surface, mostly on the side facing away from the gas giant, there were patches that did not match the rest. Patches of deep, straight lines. Patches of metal. "Captain, you need to see this," Dessa said, her voice tight. Ren walked over and looked at the screen herself. What she saw made her go very still. The straight lines were not natural. They were structures. Long, buried tunnels and domes, half covered by dust and rock, clearly built to look like nothing from a distance. Someone had gone to a great deal of trouble to hide them, and hidden things, Ren knew from long experience, were almost always hiding something important. "Get me a full scan," she ordered, "passive only. I do not want any active pulses going out. If someone built that, I do not want them to know we are here yet." The ship's sensor officer, an older Vantori named Tolvin Bree, worked quickly at his console. Passive scanning was slow and difficult. It meant gathering every scrap of light, heat, and gravity data that came naturally off the moon, without sending out any signal that could be detected. It took nearly an hour to build a clear picture, but when it was done, everyone on the bridge gathered around the main screen in silence. The moon was not dead, far from it. Beneath the gray dust and broken rock, there was an entire hidden world. Long tunnels ran for kilometers under the surface, connecting large open chambers that Tolvan's scans showed were pressurized and warm, clear signs of a livable atmosphere inside. There were what looked like reactors, dozens of them, buried deep and shielded so well that only the most careful scan could find their heat signatures at all. And there were shipyards. "That cannot be right," Dessa whispered, staring at the screen. Tolvan adjusted his readings twice, checking and rechecking. "It is right," he said finally. "There are at least 4 large docking structures on the dark side of the moon. 2 of them currently hold ships under construction. 1 holds what looks like a completed vessel. The 4th is empty, but the framework suggests it was built for something even larger than the others." Ren stared at the shapes on the screen. The ships under construction were long and sharp, built with a design she did not recognize. Not compact design. Not any of the other 17 known species the compact traded and fought with over the centuries. Something new. Something nobody in the wider galaxy had ever seen before. "Who built this place?" Ren asked quietly, more to herself than to her crew. Nobody had an answer. She ordered the ship to move to a higher orbit, further from the moon, to reduce the risk of being spotted, while they gathered more information. The crew worked through the following day, almost without rest, mapping every tunnel, every dome, every hidden structure they could find. Slowly, a picture began to form, and it was a picture that made even the most experienced member of the crew uneasy. This was not a small hidden base. It was a fully developed, self-sufficient colony, built entirely underground and under thick rock to avoid detection from space. The scans suggested farms lit by artificial light, water recycling systems on a massive scale, and living space for what Tolvan estimated could be tens of thousands of people, all of it hidden under a moon that compact records said had nothing on it at all. "How long has this been here?" Dessa asked. Tolvan ran the numbers again. "Based on the rate of dust and rock covering the older structures, compared to the newer ones, I would guess construction began at least 200 years ago, maybe longer. And it has clearly been growing the entire time. 200 years. That lined up almost exactly with when the compact had marked this sector as dead and stopped sending ships here." Ren felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature controls. Someone had come to this forgotten corner of space 200 years ago, found a moon nobody wanted, and built a hidden nation under its surface. And in all that time, in a galaxy full of curious species and expanding empires, nobody had ever noticed. Until now. "Captain," Tolvan said suddenly, his voice sharp, "I am picking up movement." Ren turned back to the screen. One of the large docking structures on the dark side of the moon was opening. A long shape was rising slowly out of the shipyard, sliding free of the framework that had held it during construction. As it cleared the structure and turned into open space, its true size became clear, and it was enormous, far larger than the silent current, larger even than most compact warships Ren had ever seen in person. "That is a warship," Tolvan said. "I am certain of it. Look at the hull. Thick armor plating, weapon emplacements along the entire length. That is not a cargo vessel or a survey ship. That is built for war." As they watched, a second vessel powered up inside another dock, its systems glowing faintly with light even through the thick rock covering it. Then a third. Small patrol craft, quicker and smaller than the great warship but clearly armed as well, began moving along paths near the moon's surface, as if on regular guard duty. Their warships were everywhere, Dessa said softly, almost without meaning to speak the thought aloud. This whole moon is a base, a fortress. How did nobody know about this? Ren did not answer right away. Her mind was racing through the possibilities. If this was some rogue, compact faction, hidden away and secretly building forces for some future plan, that would already be serious enough. But the ship designs did not match anything in the compact archives. The technology, the shapes, even the way the reactors were built, all of it was different. Alien, in the truest sense of the word. Not from any species the wider galaxy had ever recorded. We need to see one of them up close, Ren said finally. Not the warship. Too risky. One of the small patrol craft. If we can manage it without being seen. Captain, with respect, Tolvin said carefully. If this is a hidden military base of this size, getting close to any of their ships is extremely dangerous. If they have sensors even close to compact standard, they may already suspect something is out here. I know, Ren said. But look at what we are dealing with. An entire hidden colony, multiple warships, a shipyard building even more. If we go back now, with only distant readings, nobody in the compact will believe what we found. We need proof. Real proof. Something that shows exactly what kind of threat, or opportunity, this is. The crew exchanged glances, but nobody argued. They all understood the weight of what they had found. This was not a normal scouting mission anymore. This was the kind of discovery that could change the shape of compact policy for decades, maybe centuries. Over the next several hours, the silent current moved with extreme caution, drifting on minimum power, along a wide arc that would bring it near one of the smaller patrol routes without crossing into any obvious detection range. Every system that could reduce the ship's signature was pushed to its limit. Engines ran cold, communications stayed completely silent. The crew spoke only when necessary, and even then in low voices, as if the enemy, if that was truly what these people were, might somehow hear them across the vacuum of space. As they crept closer, more details became visible. The small patrol ships were fast, agile, clearly designed for both speed and combat. Their hulls carried markings that none of the crew recognized, symbols that looked almost like letters from an old alphabet, arranged in patterns that suggested language, history, culture. This was not some mindless automated defense system. These were ships built and crewed by a thinking, organized people. Then Tolvin's console gave a sharp, quiet beep. "Captain," he said, his voice suddenly urgent. "One of the patrol ships has changed course. It is moving toward our position." Ren's blood went cold. "Are we detected?" "I do not know. It could be routine. It could be nothing. But it is coming directly toward us, and it is accelerating." On the main screen, the small shape of the patrol ship grew slowly larger, cutting a straight path through the dark toward the hidden scout vessel. Behind it, in the distance, the massive shape of the great warship still sat near its shipyard, engines glowing faintly, as if it too were beginning to stir. Ren stared at the screen, her mind working through every option. Run and risk revealing their exact position and speed. Stay hidden and hope the patrol ship passed by. Or prepare, for the first time in the history of the compact, for real contact with a species nobody back home had ever imagined existed. "All stations," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Hold position. Hold silence. Let us see what they do." The patrol ship kept coming, closer with every passing second, and the crew of the silent current held their breath in the dark, waiting to find out if the secret of the forgotten moon had just found them first. The patrol ship did not slow down. On the bridge of the silent current, Captain Ren Solove watched the small, sharp shape grow larger on her screen with every passing second. Her crew stood frozen at their stations, barely breathing, as if silence alone could hide a ship that might already have been found. "Range?" Ren asked, her voice low. 10,000 kilometers, and closing fast, Tolvin answered. "Still no active scanning that I can detect. But their course has not changed. They are coming straight for us." Dessa's hands hovered over the navigation controls. "Captain, orders?" Ren thought fast. Running now, at this range, with an enemy ship already closing in, would almost certainly reveal their engine signature and give away their exact speed and heading. Staying still might work if the patrol ship was on a random path that only looked threatening. But every instinct she had built over 20 years of scouting told her this was not a random path. "Hold," she said. "Full stealth. No power beyond life support and passive sensors. If they are truly heading for us, I want them to work for it." The seconds stretched into a minute, then two. The patrol ship kept closing, moving with a smooth, confident speed that suggested a well-trained crew. At 5,000 kilometers, Tolvin's console flashed a soft warning light. "They are scanning," he said. "Active sensors, short range, focused emission pattern. They know something is here, Captain. They may not have exact coordinates yet, but they are looking hard." Ren felt the old, familiar tightness in her chest that came before every dangerous moment in her career. But this was different from anything she had faced before. This was not a compact rival or a pirate ship. This was contact with something entirely new, something that had built an army in secret for 2 centuries. "Hail them," she said suddenly. Dessa turned, startled. "Captain? If they find us anyway, I would rather they find a ship trying to talk than a ship trying to hide. Open a channel. All standard frequencies. Every translation protocol we have. Let them know we are not here to fight." It was a gamble, and everyone on the bridge knew it. But Ren had learned long ago that in first contact situations, the first choice often decided everything that followed. Hiding from a ship that had already found you looked exactly like guilt. Guilt looked exactly like a threat. The channel opened, sending out a simple, repeating signal in every format the Silent Current's computers could produce. Symbols of peace, mathematical sequences meant to show intelligence and non-hostile intent, even a basic visual of an open hand, a gesture used across many known species to show empty palms and no weapons. For a long moment, there was no answer. The patrol ship kept closing, now only 2,000 kilometers away, close enough that its shape filled a good portion of the main screen. It was smaller than Ren had first thought, built for speed rather than raw power, but its hull carried heavy weapon mounts that left no doubt about its purpose. Then, without warning, the ship fired a single warning shot. A bright streak of energy crossed the space just ahead of the Silent Current's bow, close enough to rattle the hull sensors, but clearly aimed to miss. "They heard us," Ren said quietly. "That is not an attack. That is a warning. Hold position. Do not raise shields. Do not power weapons." A tense silence followed. Then, to the surprise of the entire crew, a new signal came through on the same channel they had opened. It was rough, clearly built quickly, using pieces of the Silent Current's own signal patterns copied and sent back, along with something new, a string of sounds that the ship's translation systems began slowly working to understand. It took several minutes, but eventually a broken, halting translation appeared on the main screen. "Unknown ship, you are inside restricted space. Power down weapons. Follow us, do not resist." "They already have translation capability," Tolvin said, stunned. "Basic, but functional. That means they have had contact with outside languages before, or they built this from analyzing our own signal just now, which would be even more impressive." Ren stared at the message. Her instincts told her this was the moment that mattered most. Fighting was not really an option. The Silent Current carried almost no weapons, and even if it did, starting a battle here, surrounded by warships and patrol craft, would be suicide. Fleeing was equally hopeless against a faster, armed opponent that already had their position. "Send a reply," she said. "Tell them we are a scout ship, unarmed. We came from a wider alliance of star systems called the Compact. We did not know this system was occupied. We wish to speak, not fight." The message went out. The wait that followed felt far longer than the few minutes it actually took. Then the patrol ship's course shifted slightly, moving to a position just ahead and to the side of the Silent Current, clearly meant to guide rather than attack. Follow. No weapons. No tricks. Ren nodded slowly, even though nobody but her own crew could see the gesture. "Dessa, follow their course. Match their speed exactly. Let us show them we mean what we say." The 2 ships moved together through the dark, the small, fast patrol craft leading the way, the Silent Current following at a careful, respectful distance. As they came closer to the moon, more details of the hidden base became visible, even without active scanning. Lights glowed faintly along ridges of rock that had been carved into landing platforms. Larger shapes moved in the distance. More warships, more patrol craft, more proof that this was no small outpost but a true stronghold. They were led not to the great warship, but to a massive structure built into the side of a crater near the moon's equator. As the Silent Current approached, a huge door, cut directly into solid rock and disguised on the outside to look like natural stone, slid open, revealing a lit docking bay large enough to hold a dozen ships their size. "Captain," Dessa said quietly, "should we be worried?" "Yes," Ren said honestly, "but worry will not help us now. Bring us in slowly. Let them see we are following instructions." The Silent Current drifted into the docking bay, guided by signals from the patrol ship, Inside, the bay was lit by warm artificial light, filled with equipment, walkways, and figures moving between them. The first clear look any of the crew had gotten of the people who had built all of this. They were humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, a single head, walking upright much like the Vantori themselves, though their proportions were slightly different, their skin tones varying between shades the crew had never quite seen before, their hair growing in ways that seemed almost decorative compared to the smooth scalp of most Vantori. They wore simple but well-made uniforms, dark in color, and many of them carried weapons openly, though none pointed them at the newly arrived ship. "They look almost like old paintings," Tolvin murmured, staring at the screen. "Like drawings from the earliest days of the compact archives, before we had contact with any other species. There were old myths, Captain, about a race that looked exactly like this." Ren remembered the stories too, faint and half-forgotten, passed down as legend rather than fact. A race called, in the oldest and most broken records, simply, the humans. A species that some very old compact texts claimed to have briefly encountered many centuries ago, before losing all contact and assuming they had died out entirely, wiped away by some disaster or war, long before the compact had grown into the great alliance it was today. "It cannot be," Ren said softly. "They were supposed to be gone, extinct." That is what the old records say. But the evidence stood right in front of her, plain and undeniable. The docking bay finished its cycle, and a voice came over an external speaker, this time speaking directly in a heavily accented, but understandable version of the common trade language used across much of the compact. "Power down your engines, open your airlock. You will not be harmed if you cooperate." Ren gave the order. The engines fell silent. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and a moment later, several armed figures stepped through, moving carefully, but without the panic or aggression Ren had feared. At their front walked a tall figure with short, dark hair and sharp, watchful eyes, wearing a uniform slightly different from the others, marked with symbols that clearly showed some kind of rank. "I am Commander Elias Voss," the figure said, speaking slowly and clearly, as if aware the translation might not be perfect. "You will explain who you are, where you came from, and why you are watching our home, and you will do it now." Ren stepped forward, keeping her hands visible and open, the same simple gesture she had sent earlier over the comm channel. "My name is Ren Solove. I am a scout captain of the Threshold Compact, an alliance of many star systems. We believed this entire sector to be empty. We came here only to update old records. We did not know anyone lived here. We are not here to fight." Commander Voss studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the other armed figures watched closely, weapons ready but not raised. "The Threshold Compact," Voss repeated slowly, as if testing the words. "We have heard rumors of such a thing. Traders passing near the edge of old dead systems, speaking of a great alliance far beyond our borders. We never expected to be found so soon." "Found by accident," Ren said. "My navigator noticed a heat signature that should not have existed on a moon. Your own hidden systems worked very hard to make look completely dead. Whatever you have built here, Commander, you built it well enough to stay hidden from an entire galactic alliance for 200 years. Something shifted in Voss's expression, a flicker of grim pride mixed with old caution. 211 years, he said quietly. "Since the first ships landed, since the first tunnels were dug, since our ancestors decided that if the galaxy ever came looking for us again, it would not find us weak." "Again?" Ren asked carefully. "You speak as if this has happened before." Voss was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, Ren felt the full weight of a history she did not yet understand, a history that had led an entire people to hide in the dark, build fleets of warships in secret, and wait, generation after generation, for the day someone finally found them. "Come with me," Voss said finally. "If you truly wish to understand what you have found, Captain Solove, then you should hear the whole story. It is not short, and it is not a happy one, but it explains everything you have seen, and everything you are about to see." Ren glanced back at her crew, who watched her with a mixture of fear and fascination. Then she nodded and stepped forward, following Commander Voss deeper into the hidden fortress that generations of humans had built beneath the surface of a forgotten moon, ready at last to learn the truth about the people the galaxy had once believed were extinct. Commander Voss led Ren Solove through long, wide corridors, cut directly into rock. The walls were smooth and lined with soft lights, and the air smelled faintly of recycled oxygen and warm metal. Everywhere Ren looked, she saw signs of a people who had built their entire world underground, out of necessity rather than choice. Pipes ran along the ceilings carrying water and air. Doors led off into rooms she could only guess at: living quarters, workshops, storage bays. The place had the feel of a city, not a military base, though the two seemed to blend together everywhere she looked. They walked in silence for several minutes before reaching a large chamber with a round table at its center, and old images displayed along the curved walls. Some were faded photographs, others were paintings, clearly made by hand, showing scenes Ren did not understand. Green fields under a blue sky, tall buildings reaching toward clouds, oceans stretching to the horizon. "This is Earth," Voss said quietly, noticing where her eyes had gone. "Our homeworld, or what used to be our homeworld." "Used to be?" Ren asked. Voss gestured for her to sit, and he took a seat across from her, his posture tired in a way that seemed to come from more than just the day's events. "Sit, Captain Solove. I will tell you the story exactly as it was told to me, the way it has been told to every child of this colony for over 200 years. Ren sat. Her crew waited outside under guard, but not mistreated. She had chosen to come alone into this room, trusting her instincts that violence was not what these people wanted, at least not yet. "Long ago," Voss began, "before the compact you serve had ever heard of us, humanity lived on a single world called Earth. We built cities, we explored our own solar system, and eventually, we built ships that could cross the stars. We were young, compared to many of the species we later learned existed. Foolishly young, we believed we were alone in the universe, or if not alone, that any other intelligent life would be reasonable, curious, perhaps even friendly." He paused, his eyes distant, as if seeing something far beyond the walls of the room. "We were wrong. Roughly 300 years ago, by our own calendar, an alien fleet arrived in our home system. Not the compact, a different power, one your people may or may not still remember, calling themselves the Skarn Dominion. They did not come to talk. They came to take. Our world had resources they wanted, and they saw no reason to ask before taking them." Ren felt a chill. She knew the name Skarn Dominion only from old historical records, a power that the compact itself had fought and eventually crushed generations ago, after decades of brutal war. The compact records described the Dominion as ruthless conquerors who destroyed dozens of young, developing civilizations before finally being stopped. "We fought back," Voss continued. "Humanity was not strong enough to win, not against a fleet like that, but we were stubborn enough not to simply lie down and die. The war lasted 11 years. By the end of it, Earth's surface was scarred beyond repair in many regions, our largest cities in ruins, and thousands of ships destroyed on both sides. In the final months, as it became clear that total defeat was near, our leaders made a choice. They gathered as many survivors as they could, along with the last working ships, and they fled." "Fled where?" Ren asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Anywhere," Voss said. "Everywhere. Small groups of ships scattered in every direction, hoping that at least some would survive and find safety somewhere the Dominion would never think to look. My ancestors were part of one such group, 7 ships, carrying just over 11,000 people. They traveled for years, running low on fuel and supplies, searching for any world that could sustain human life without drawing attention." Ren thought of the old, half-forgotten legend she had heard as a child, the story of a race that had vanished from compact records after a great and terrible war, presumed destroyed. She had never imagined the truth could be sitting in front of her, alive, and speaking with quiet, controlled grief. "They found this system," Voss said, gesturing vaguely upward, toward the rock and stone above them. "A gas giant with several moons, in a sector so unimportant that even the great empires of that time had never bothered to survey it closely. This moon had no breathable air, no easy resources, nothing that made it valuable to anyone. That was exactly why it was perfect. Our ancestors landed here, dug the first tunnels by hand and machine, and made a promise to every generation that would follow them." "What promise?" Ren asked softly. "That humanity would never again be caught defenseless," Voss said, his voice hardening slightly. That we would rebuild in secret, grow in secret, and prepare in secret, so that if the day ever came when the wider galaxy found us again, whether the Dominion, or some new threat, or simply curious strangers like your own crew, we would not have to run. We would be ready to stand, and be respected, not conquered. The room fell silent for a long moment. Ren tried to imagine what that must have taken. 200 years of hidden labor, generation after generation born underground, taught from birth that the greatest danger in the universe could arrive at any moment, and that survival depended entirely on quiet, endless preparation. The warships, Ren said finally. The shipyards, all of it, built for this single purpose. Every ship you saw, Voss confirmed, and many more you did not see, hidden in deeper docks across other moons in this system. We are not simply a hidden colony, Captain Solovey. We are a hidden fleet, a hidden nation, armed and ready, that the wider galaxy has never known existed. Every child born here learns 3 things before they learn to walk: how to survive in a sealed environment, how to operate basic machinery, and why we hide. The lesson of the Dominion War is taught to every single generation, so that it is never forgotten and never repeated. Ren looked at the old paintings on the wall again, the green fields and blue skies of a world these people had never personally seen, yet clearly still mourned. Do you know what happened to Earth after your ancestors fled? Voss's expression tightened. We do not know for certain. Our oldest records suggest the Dominion took what they wanted and eventually moved on, more interested in extracting resources than fully occupying a badly damaged world. There are rumors, carried by trade ships, that occasionally pass near the edges of this sector, of scattered human settlements still surviving elsewhere in the wider galaxy, some free, some under Dominion rule even now. But we have never had the strength to go looking. Not yet. And now? Ren asked. Now that we have found you? Voss studied her carefully, his eyes sharp despite the weariness in his voice. That depends entirely on what your people decide to do with what you have seen here, Captain Solovey. If your compact comes in peace, seeking only understanding, then perhaps 200 years of hiding can finally come to an end. But if your compact sees us only as a resource to exploit, or a threat to eliminate before we grow any stronger, then you should understand this clearly. We are not the frightened, broken survivors who once fled the Dominion. We have spent 2 centuries building the strength to make certain that never happens again. As if to underline his words, a low tremor passed through the chamber, followed by the distant sound of heavy machinery moving somewhere deep beneath them. Ren realized, with a growing understanding, that the entire moon around her was alive with activity. Shipyards working around the clock, defense systems constantly maintained, an entire hidden civilization dedicated, above all else, to readiness. I did not come here to threaten you, Ren said carefully. I came here by accident, doing routine work for an alliance that believed this sector held nothing at all. What I have seen here is beyond anything my superiors could have imagined. I cannot promise you how the compact leadership will react, but I can promise you that I will report exactly what I have witnessed, your history, your strength, and your reasons for hiding. Not as a threat, but as a people who deserve to be understood before any decisions are made. Voss studied her for a long moment, weighing her words carefully. Finally, he gave a slow nod. That is more honesty than I expected from a stranger who fell into our territory by accident. Very well, Captain Solovey. You will be allowed to return to your ship, and you will be allowed to leave, carrying word of what you have seen back to your compact. But understand this warning clearly, and make certain it reaches whoever leads your people. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and steady. If warships come to this system with hostile intent, believing us weak or unprepared, simply because we chose to hide rather than announce ourselves to a galaxy that once tried to destroy us, they will find something very different waiting for them. We have spent 200 years preparing for exactly that possibility. We would rather it never happens, but we are ready, Captain, in every sense of the word, for the day it does. Ren rose slowly from her seat, the weight of everything she had learned settling heavily on her shoulders. She thought of the great warship she had seen rising from its dock, the dozens of smaller patrol craft, the endless tunnels full of people, who had spent 2 centuries training and building in the dark, waiting for a day they hoped would never come. I understand, Commander, she said quietly. I will make certain my report reflects exactly what I have seen, and exactly what you have told me. Whatever happens next, it will not be because the compact was left in ignorance of the truth." Voss studied her a moment longer, then nodded once, a gesture that seemed to carry both caution and something close to respect. "Then let us hope, Captain Solovey, for both our people's sake, that whoever reads your report chooses wisdom over pride. Because if they do not, the galaxy is about to learn a lesson that humanity has never forgotten. We do not go quietly. Not anymore. Not ever again." Wren left the chamber soon after, escorted back toward the docking bay where her crew and ship waited. As she walked, she could not stop thinking about the scale of what she had witnessed. An entire hidden civilization, forged in the memory of near destruction, armed and waiting beneath the surface of a moon the wider galaxy had long ago written off as dead. She did not yet know that her report, once it reached Compact Command, would not be met with the caution and respect Voss had hoped for. She did not yet know that some among the Compact's military leadership, upon hearing of an undefended-looking colony sitting on valuable, untouched territory, would see not a people to respect, but a prize to be seized before anyone else could claim it. The forgotten moon had been found, and soon the wider galaxy would learn exactly why it had stayed hidden for so long. 3 weeks after the silent current returned to Compact space, Captain Ren Solovey stood before the Compact Regional Command Council, a wide half-circle of tables filled with senior officers and officials from a dozen member worlds. She had spent every one of those 3 weeks preparing her report, checking every detail, making certain her account of the forgotten moon and the hidden human colony was as accurate and complete as possible. She told them everything: the hidden tunnels, the shipyards, the warships, the story of the Dominion War, and the flight of the surviving humans 200 years ago. She told them of Commander Voss's warning, spoken clearly and without exaggeration, that any hostile approach to the system would be met with real, prepared resistance. When she finished speaking, the council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Admiral Corvain Dresch, a senior military officer known throughout the Compact for his aggressive views on expansion, leaned forward with a thin smile. "So," he said slowly, "what you are telling this council, Captain Solovey, is that we have discovered an entire undefended pocket colony, sitting on a resource-rich system that has been sitting idle for 2 centuries, populated by the descendants of a species our own historical records list as extinct. A species with no allies, no fleet beyond their own small system, no compact membership, no treaties, no protections whatsoever under galactic law." "Admiral," Wren said carefully, "with respect, they are not undefended. I made that very clear in my report. Their warships, old rock-carved shipyards, and a handful of homemade warships," Dresch interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "Built by a civilization that spent 200 years hiding in tunnels, rather than developing real technology. Captain, I do not doubt what you saw impressed you, but you are a scout, not a fleet tactician. What looks like a fearsome fortress to an unarmed survey ship may look quite different to an actual battle fleet." Wren felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Admiral, I would strongly advise against underestimating them. Their technology, while different from our own, showed clear signs of significant sophistication. Their shipyards were active and productive, and most importantly, their history shows a people utterly determined never to be caught unprepared again." "Noted," Dresch said, though his tone made it clear the warning had already been dismissed. He turned to address the rest of the council. "Colleagues, I believe this discovery represents a significant opportunity for the Compact. A resource-rich system, currently held only by a small, isolated population with no outside support. I propose we send the 7th Battle Fleet to formally claim the system, under standard first contact protocols. If the local population proves cooperative, they may be offered limited Compact membership. If they resist," he paused meaningfully, "the Compact reserves the right to secure valuable, unclaimed territory by whatever means necessary." Several council members murmured in agreement. Wren looked around the chamber, searching for any sign of support for a more cautious approach, but found mostly nodding heads and calculating expressions. The promise of untouched resources and unclaimed territory was, apparently, more persuasive than the warning of a captain who had actually been there. "This is a mistake," Wren said, her voice rising slightly despite her effort to remain composed. "I have met these people. I have spoken with their leadership. They are not weak, and they are not naive. If the 7th Fleet arrives with hostile intent, there will be a battle, and I do not believe the outcome is as certain as this council seems to assume. Admiral Dresch's smile did not waver. Your concern is noted, Captain Sullivan, and your report has been valuable. But this council has made its decision. The 7th Fleet will depart within the week. Wren left the council chamber feeling a deep, cold dread settle into her stomach. She had done everything she could to prevent this outcome, and it had not been enough. 7 days later, the 7th Battle Fleet, 43 warships strong, the largest force the Compact had assembled for a single operation in over a decade, entered Sector 1118 dead, under the command of Admiral Corvain Dresch himself. He had insisted on leading the operation personally, confident that a show of overwhelming force would either frighten the human colony into immediate surrender or crush any resistance quickly and decisively. As the fleet approached the gas giant and its moons, sensor operators began picking up readings that made even the most confident officers pause. The 4th moon, the one Wren Solovey had described in her report, was indeed exactly as she had said, covered in hidden structures, shipyards, and defensive installations. But now, with a full battle fleet's advanced sensors, instead of a single scout ship's careful passive scanning, the true scale of what lay hidden beneath the surface became clear for the first time. It was larger, far larger than anyone had estimated. Admiral, his sensor chief reported, her voice tight with concern. Long-range scans are picking up considerably more than the initial report indicated. Multiple additional moons in this system show similar hidden structures. We are detecting what appears to be an extensive network of shipyards, defense platforms, and orbital installations spread across at least 6 different moons, not just the one originally identified. Dresch frowned, studying the data himself. Estimate their fleet strength. The sensor chief hesitated. Difficult to say precisely, Admiral, given how well hidden much of it remains even now. But based on the number of active docks and support structures, my best estimate would be considerably more than 43 vessels. A tense silence fell over the fleet's command bridge. Dresch's confident expression flickered, just slightly, before he regained his composure. They are still just one system, he said firmly. One system, however well defended, cannot match the full might of a compact battle fleet. Proceed as planned. Broadcast our formal claim and demand for surrender. If they resist, we will demonstrate exactly why the Compact did not survive 1,000 years by backing down from a fight. The message went out across all known frequencies, a formal Compact demand for the system's surrender, offering conditional membership in exchange for immediate compliance, and warning of military action should the demand be refused. The fleet waited, engines ready, weapons armed, for a response. It came faster than anyone expected. Every sensor screen across the 7th Fleet lit up almost simultaneously as dozens, then hundreds of new contacts appeared, rising from hidden docks across 6 different moons, emerging from camouflaged bunkers on the gas giant's largest asteroid belt, and pouring out from positions that had been completely invisible only moments before. Warships of every size, from small, fast interceptors to massive vessels rivaling the largest ships in the compact fleet, formed up in disciplined, practiced formations, with a speed that spoke of decades, if not centuries, of training and preparation. Admiral, the sensor chief said, her voice now openly alarmed. I am counting well over 200 vessels, and the number is still rising. This is not a colony defense force. This is a full military power. Dresch stared at the screen, his earlier confidence draining rapidly from his face. Before he could give any new orders, a single transmission came through, calm and steady, cutting through the chaos of the fleet's sensor alerts. This is Admiral Elena Cross, commanding the combined defense forces of the sovereign human colonies. Compact Fleet, you have entered our territory under threat of military action. You have been warned, through your own scout captain, that we would not be found weak. You did not listen. We ask you, one final time, to withdraw peacefully. If you do not, we will not hesitate to defend our home. Admiral Dresch's jaw tightened. Pride, and perhaps a refusal to believe that any hidden, isolated colony could truly match a compact battle fleet, won out over caution. Hold formation, he ordered. All ships, prepare for combat. We will not be bullied by a bluff. no matter how impressive their numbers appear on our screens. The battle that followed would later be studied for generations, in both compact and human military academies, as a masterclass in the danger of underestimating a prepared opponent. The human fleet did not simply meet the compact ships head-on in a straightforward clash of firepower. Instead, they used the terrain of their own system with devastating precision. Asteroid fields became cover for ambush squadrons. The gravity well of the gas giant was used to slingshot fast attack craft into unexpected firing angles, and hidden defense platforms on the moons themselves opened fire on compact ships that had unknowingly positioned themselves within range. Ren Solove, who had insisted on accompanying the fleet as an advisor, despite Admiral Dresch's clear disdain for her warnings, watched from a secondary command vessel as the battle unfolded exactly as she had feared it might. Compact ships, confident in their traditional tactics, found themselves outmaneuvered again and again by human vessels that seemed to anticipate their every move, coordinated by 2 centuries of simulated warfare and constant tactical drilling. They have been preparing for this exact scenario since the day they arrived here, Ren said quietly to the young officer standing beside her, watching the tactical display with growing dread. Every drill, every simulation, every ship built in those hidden shipyards, all of it, was designed with one purpose: defending this system against exactly the kind of overwhelming force we just sent against them. Within 4 hours, the outcome was no longer in question. 12 compact warships had been destroyed outright. 19 more were badly damaged, their crews fighting desperately just to retreat from the system rather than continue an unwinnable fight. Human losses, while real and costly to their own forces, were a fraction of the devastation inflicted on the compact fleet. Admiral Dresch, watching his once proud battle fleet reduced to a battered, retreating remnant, finally gave the order every officer under his command had been silently praying for. All ships, withdraw. Full retreat. Signal Admiral Cross. Tell her we accept a ceasefire. As the surviving compact ships limped away from the system, Ren Solove looked back at the tactical display one final time, watching the human fleet hold formation rather than pursue, choosing restraint even in the moment of clear victory. It was, she realized, a message every bit as important as the battle itself. The humans had not fought to destroy the compact fleet completely. They had fought only to prove, beyond any possible doubt, that they could not be conquered. The forgotten moon was forgotten no longer, and the galaxy, whether it was ready or not, was about to learn to see humanity in an entirely new light. News of the battle reached Compact Central Command within days, carried by the fastest courier ships available. What began as a simple report of a failed military operation quickly grew into the single most talked-about event across the entire Compact. 43 warships sent to claim what had been described as an undefended, isolated colony. 12 destroyed, 19 damaged. A retreat forced by a fleet nobody in the wider galaxy had known existed until weeks earlier. The reaction across compact space was immediate and intense. Some worlds called for a larger, more overwhelming response, determined to avoid the embarrassment of a second failure. Others, more cautious, pointed out that a civilization capable of building over 200 warships in secret over the course of 2 centuries, without ever being detected, was clearly not an enemy to be treated lightly. The council that had approved Admiral Dresch's operation found itself under enormous pressure, with many demanding to know why Captain Ren Solove's original warnings had been so completely ignored. Ren herself was called before the council once again, this time not to deliver a report that would be dismissed, but to advise on what should happen next. She stood in the same chamber where, weeks earlier, her warnings had been brushed aside in favor of ambition and pride. This time, the room was silent and attentive as she spoke. "We were wrong to see them as a target," she said plainly. "We were wrong to assume that because they hid from the galaxy, they were weak or afraid. They hid because 200 years ago, a conquering power very nearly destroyed them completely, and they made a promise to themselves never to be caught defenseless again. That promise built the fleet that just humbled one of our own. If we approach them now with humility and honesty, I believe there is still a path toward peace. But if we approach them again with force, I believe the next battle will be even more costly than the last." This time, the council listened. A new delegation was formed, this time not a battle fleet, but a diplomatic mission, small and unarmed. requesting only the chance to speak. Ren Solave was asked to lead it, given her prior contact with the human colony, and the respect Commander Voss had shown her during their first meeting. She agreed without hesitation. The diplomatic ship approached the system slowly, broadcasting clear signals of peaceful intent from the moment it crossed into detection range. This time, no warning shots were fired. A single human patrol craft met them at the edge of the system and guided them in without incident, all the way to the same hidden docking bay Ren had visited once before. Admiral Elena Cross herself was waiting to meet them, along with Commander Voss, standing in the same warmly lit chamber, where Ren had first heard the story of humanity's flight from Earth. Cross was a tall woman with steady gray eyes and the calm bearing of someone who had spent her entire life preparing for moments exactly like this one. "Captain Solave," Cross said, extending a hand in the human gesture of greeting that Ren had learned about during her earlier visit. "I understand you argued against the attack on our system." "I did," Ren said, shaking the offered hand. "I am sorry it happened at all. My warnings were not enough to prevent it, and for that, I am truly sorry." Cross studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You came back anyway, unarmed, willing to speak honestly, even after what happened. That tells me more about your intentions than any words could." Over the following days, formal negotiations began between the compact delegation and the leadership of what Cross and Voss called the sovereign human colonies. It quickly became clear that the humans were not interested in conquest or expansion beyond their own system, nor did they hold a deep desire for revenge against the compact for the failed attack. What they wanted, more than anything, was simple: recognition, respect, and the freedom to decide their own future, without fear of being erased or exploited. "We do not wish to be your enemy," Admiral Cross told the assembled delegation during one of the final negotiation sessions. "We built our strength, not to conquer, but to survive. We have spent 200 years hiding from a galaxy we believed might destroy us again, the way the Dominion nearly did. Your attack, in a strange way, confirmed our worst fears were justified. But your return, unarmed and honest, offers a different possibility, one we have hoped for since the very first tunnels were dug beneath this moon." After weeks of careful negotiation, a formal treaty was signed between the compact and the sovereign human colonies. It was not a treaty of full compact membership, at least not yet. Both sides agreed that trust would need to be built slowly, over years rather than months. Instead, it established formal recognition of human sovereignty over their home system, an agreement of non-aggression, and the beginning of careful, limited trade and cultural exchange between the two peoples. Word of the agreement spread quickly across compact space, and with it, curiosity about the mysterious species that had defeated a compact battle fleet while asking for nothing more than the right to be left alone. Scholars and historians began requesting permission to study the recovered fragments of old Earth history that the human colony was willing to share. Traders began cautiously approaching human border patrols, hoping to establish the first legitimate trade routes into a system that had, until recently, been considered dead and empty. 6 months after the treaty was signed, Ren Solave returned to the human colony one final time, not as a scout gathering secret information, but as an official compact liaison, tasked with helping to smooth the early stages of contact between the two civilizations. She found the hidden moon much the same as before, still cautious, still heavily defended, still deeply shaped by the memory of the war that had driven humanity from Earth centuries earlier. But there were small changes too. New docking bays being built to accommodate legitimate trade ships. Children in the colony's schools beginning to learn about the wider galaxy beyond their own hidden system, no longer taught only to fear it, but also to understand it. She found Commander Voss overseeing the construction of one such new docking bay, directing workers with the same steady confidence she remembered from their first meeting. "Captain Solave," he said, greeting her with something that looked almost like a smile. "Back again. I admit, I did not expect to see you here under such peaceful circumstances." "Neither did I, if I am honest," Ren said. "For a while, I feared this system's story would end very differently." Voss nodded slowly, his expression growing more thoughtful. "So did we. 200 years of preparation, and in the end, it was not our warships that changed things. It was one honest report from one honest captain, and the willingness of a few people on both sides to choose understanding over fear. Ren looked out across the busy docking bay, watching human workers move between old warships and new trade vessels, a strange but hopeful mixture of a people still cautious of the wider galaxy, yet slowly, carefully, beginning to step out of the shadows they had hidden in for so long. "What happens now?" she asked. "For your people, I mean. Now that the secret is out." Voss considered the question seriously before answering. "Now, I think, we begin to remember who we were before the Dominion War, not just who we became hiding from it. We were explorers once, Captain. Curious, ambitious. It has been 200 years since any human ship traveled beyond this single system. Perhaps it is time that changed." As if to punctuate his words, a new ship eased out of one of the older shipyards in the distance. Not a warship this time, but something built with a different purpose in mind, sleek and long-ranged, clearly designed for exploration rather than combat. Ren watched it go, understanding that she was witnessing something significant, the first tentative steps of a hidden civilization, finally choosing to rejoin the wider galaxy on its own terms, in its own time, without ever again being forced to hide out of fear. The story of the Forgotten Moon spread throughout compact space over the following years, becoming something between history and legend, a lesson taught to young officers about the danger of underestimating any people, no matter how isolated or unknown they might seem. Humanity, once believed extinct, once nearly erased by a conquering empire, had proven that 200 years of quiet determination could build something the wider galaxy had never expected. Not just survival, but strength. Not just hiding, but readiness. And in the end, not just fear of the unknown, but the courage to finally step out of the shadows and meet it. Admiral Dresch, stripped of his command following the disastrous attack, would spend the rest of his career studying what had gone wrong, eventually publishing a report that became required reading in compact military academies, warning against exactly the kind of arrogance that had cost so many lives. Ren Solove, meanwhile, would go on to become the first official compact ambassador to the sovereign human colonies, a position she would hold with pride for the rest of her long career, forever remembered as the scout captain whose honesty helped turn a moment of near disaster into the beginning of an unlikely, and ultimately powerful, friendship between two very different peoples. And on the Forgotten Moon, now quietly becoming a little less forgotten with each passing year, the descendants of those first 11,000 survivors who had fled a burning Earth 200 years earlier, continued building, training, and preparing, just as they always had. Not out of fear anymore, but out of pride. Because they had learned, in the end, exactly what their ancestors had always hoped they would learn. That humanity, no matter how small, no matter how hidden, no matter how long forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, would never again be caught unprepared. And should the day ever come when they were needed again, their warships would be ready, everywhere.